Ladies and gentlemen, the front man of The Who and a debut author, please welcome Roger Daltrey. Let's get to the book. Zayn Malik is, I think, starting his second memoir at the moment. He's 25 years old. Why did you take, let me put this delicately, to the age you are now to write yours?
What can you possibly remember at the age of 25? I mean, when we were 25, we could barely remember the day before. Such was the 60s. I never felt I'd done enough in my life, and that's what's so strange. It's always, I've never quite known how to answer people when they say, what does it feel like to do what you do and have the life you've had? And I kind of feel that hasn't everybody had a life like me? I've never felt apart from my mates that I used to be with in Shepherd's Bush. I've never been apart from the class I grew up with. I've mixed with all different people, but it's kind of weird. Being me, that's what I wanted to do with this book. I wanted to try and give whoever reads it an idea of what it felt like to be in this whirlwind of a new industry starting up. And it started, sure, rock was around in America with Elvis, and it was a huge business over there. But in England, it didn't really start until the Beatles, and then the Stones, and then the Who, and Pink Floyd, and on we go. But it was a young industry that we were inventing as we went along. And that made it kind of, I don't know, incredibly dangerous, but incredibly exciting, and quite a lot of it kind of terrifying.
Yeah, but we need to go back to your childhood to understand where this rebellion came from. And so the first question, we're on the fifth question already, but the first question I wanted to ask you is this is the first event for this book. You're going to get asked this a lot. Why is it called Thanks a Lot, Mr. Kibblewhite? Who is Mr. Kibblewhite, and why is he getting all the thanks?
Well, it's called that because I didn't do a biography in the same way that most people in my position do their biography. Most people in my position, they get offered a book deal, and they do the book deal, and then they write the biography. And I just didn't want to do it that way. I didn't know whether I had a really good story in me. I wanted a good biography. So I got in touch with you and said, would you help me drag this story out of me and give me some guidance on getting it into a book shape? And when it came to the title, they just wanted to have the usual title of every biography on every shelf everywhere, which is the name of the person and the face of the person. And I thought, why be a sheep amongst a load of sheep? I want to be the dog. And I thought, I don't want to call it Daltrey. I don't want to call it that. I want something from the book, and I want a picture on the front that has a kind of reflection of what I grew up from, what was quite a big influence on the Who career. Gustav Metzger, which was the auto-destructive artist, had a big influence on Pete, which is where our smashing of equipment came from. And I thought, I can do much more with my biography cover. And I did the Graham Norton show, and he happened to ask me, I hear you got your biography coming out, what's it going to be called? And I thought, sod it. I'm going to make them an offer they can't refuse. And I said, it's going to be called Thanks a Lot, Mr. Kibblewhite. And he said, do the publishers know that? And I said, no, they do now. And that's why it's called that. That's why the cover is what it is, because I wanted it to be just that little bit different.
But Roger, who is Mr. Kibblewhite.
Oh yeah, Mr. Kibblewhite.
When I asked that question,
I keep trying to avoid that because Mr. Kibblewhite was the headmaster that after giving, I don't mention it in the book, but it was Mr. Kibblewhite. He gave me 6 strokes of the cane on my bare arse. And I've got to tell you, if any of you, I don't know, is there anybody here who's had that too? Can you shout out? If you'd had it, you know you still remember what it felt like. Ooh. So he gave me 6 of the best on my bare arse, then expelled me from the grammar school.
Through no fault of your own?
Well, yeah, from lots of faults of mine. I didn't want to be there. I just wanted to be a rock singer. I'm not a rock singer, I just wanted to be a singer. So as I was leaving his office, as I was literally passing him in the doorway, he said, "You'll never make anything of your life, Daltrey." And by that time I was past him. And I thought, "I'll bloody well show you." So that's where the title comes from. But what I want to say about Mr. Kibblewhite now is that I realised that he was just a man doing his job in a way that they used to do it in those days. And he was doing his job to the best of his ability. And I was uncontrollable. He needed to get me out of that school. And the thanks a lot, Mr. Kibblewhite, now really is a thank you. It really is. And because I'd moved to Chiswick, I couldn't go to a school in Shepherd's Bush. And the school I had to go to was Acton County. Acton County Grammar School took in people from Ruislip, Harrow, Greenford, and they were all kind of middle class, upper middle class neighbourhoods. And for the first time in my life, I came in contact with a posh accent, and I couldn't understand a word they were saying. I really couldn't. I thought instead of it feeling like an achievement, it felt like a punishment. You know, passing that 11 plus, I thought, what have I gone and done?
But this is the post-war era, and I've asked you this a lot before. This is, it's a difficult time. There's rations, etc. You're quite rose-tinted about this because you didn't ever have you didn't have PlayStations. You didn't even have Did you ever have a roast chicken dinner?
People often ask me, you were really poor when you were young. I say, no, we weren't poor at all. We were incredibly wealthy. We didn't have much money, but we were incredibly wealthy. I think we were more wealthy than today's society because we have family. And the families in those days were incredibly close. They had to be. They come through the war. It was all about, they knew how to support people in the best possible way. So we were incredibly wealthy. It wasn't that kind of, it wasn't poverty at all. We had not much money. But money doesn't buy you happiness. It really doesn't.
So, pivotal moment. Moving on. Pivotal moment. The first time that you remember picking up a microphone and performing on stage. You were 12 years old.
Well, it wasn't a microphone as such.
It was
There
a stick.
There was a stage. I can't remember a microphone. There was no stage because it was a church hall, and it was a youth club, and I had my first homemade guitar, which was very, very rudimentary, a Spanish thing that was more like a cheese cutter than a guitar, but it could make the noise of a guitar, and down low on the fretboard, you could play the 3 chords that if you learnt A, E, and B7, you could play most of the pop songs of the time. And I got up and did a kind of my version of Elvis singing Hound Dog with my hair greased back with soap. We couldn't afford Brill cream, but the soap worked wonders. And it was just wonderful, I just felt free. And then very shortly after, I saw Lonnie Donegan, who was the opposite of Elvis, performing in a dinner jacket and a bow tie. But the way he sang, it just did something to me that Elvis, I loved Elvis, and I thought I'd like to look like Elvis, and everybody thought they'd like to look like Elvis. Some people thought they looked like Elvis. Of course, nobody did except Elvis. But when Lonnie sang, there was something that came out of him that was so primal, it almost lit a touch paper in me. And I thought, that's what I want to do. And I want to find that freedom in myself to just throw my head back and let this thing that I always had perfect pitch. And incidentally, all my grandchildren have perfect pitch at the moment, which is wonderful to hear. And some of them have got quite good voices, so you're not getting rid of me that easy. That's what happened, and it was like lighting the fuse of a firework. I just had to do this thing. If ever I'm a free person, totally free, it's when I'm up on the stage singing. I'm totally, my whole ambition as a singer and my whole work ethic as a singer is to make the audience, you the audience, feel every word, feel the emotion of that word, explore what that word is saying in the emotion and make it touch you. There's so much music today, I think, in the modern world that is played at you. I try to play it to you, for you. I try and imagine in my head I'm singing that song for the first time. And if in my head I am there and I am singing that song for the first time, it will always have its own truth. It is not a cheat. So that's the only way I can explain it. My first guitar lasted about 6 weeks. And the one thing I could never quite get to grips with, building this thing on my own, which looked like a proper Spanish guitar. I mean, I did quite a good job of it. But I couldn't get the neck, where the neck goes into the body. I didn't know how to do that joint. And after 6 weeks, it just went boom. And it was like a bow and arrow from then on. Completely useless. But I was very lucky that the carpenter for the Bedford Park estate, which incidentally was the first garden city ever built in Chiswick in London, and he used to make all the window frames and the fences and the gates and all that stuff. He'd watched me make this first guitar, struggling to do it with interest. And when it folded and I was kind of in tears, and guitarless, he knocked on the door and said, come down with me. And I went into his workshop and he helped me make the second one. And the second one was a relatively good guitar compared with the first one. And that lasted for a good couple of years. It was every boy's dream, every musician, or everyone aspiring musician's dream, was to have that pink Fender guitar. But to have been able to afford that pink Fender guitar, you would have had to rob a bank. You could have bought a house for the same amount of money. It was ridiculous. So I decided to make one.
I remember this. And what was the one thing you got wrong about that? Because you saw it in the window.
I stood outside the shop window. There was one hanging in the Charing Cross Road. And I stood outside drooling at it and studying it and started measuring it through the window. And went home and I bought 2 pieces of 1-inch thick mahogany, because I worked out that this thing was probably 2 inches thick, deep. And I bought these two 1-inch pieces of mahogany, this big. And I kind of drew out what my measurements kind of told me was this Fender guitar. Cut the neck out roughly the same shape as the Fender guitar, and I shaped the body out to fit. Fender was very clever, because a Fender guitar looks like a flat piece of wood, but it's actually tailored for the body. It's cut out, it's carved out at the back, and the front slopes around. So it's incredibly comfortable to play. What I didn't realise was that the window was magnifying the guitar. And whereas the average Fender guitar weighed about probably, I don't know, 8 pounds, my guitar weighed about 15. But it was very useful if we ever needed it in battle. Really, I was too young to get married, but that's what you did in those days. I got Jackie pregnant. And I was in one room of a council flat, 6 stories up in Wandsworth, with mother-in-law in the same flat. And I gave it my best, and I just couldn't do it. And I used to look out of the window at the van in the street. I've said this story from the stage many times. And we were called the Detours in those days. And the Detours was kind of written on the side of the van with an arrow pointing out the front, Detours, with an arrow. And I swear that van was calling me. And I thought, I've got to follow my dream, because I can't do this life. And if my dream works, I can do better for everybody. As it happened, it all worked out. Equally, it could have gone the other way. I don't know. But that was how I was then. I'm not proud of it, but I'm glad I did it because it worked. Would I be glad I did it if it hadn't have worked? I don't think I ever would have let them down, let's put it that way. I'm not that kind of bloke. And as luck would have it, the thing that stepped into my life 18 years ago, which was by accident, I'd been a patron of the Teenage Cancer Trust right from its inception. I want this to be the start of what will end up being sections of hospitals where any adolescent or young adult with any hospitalised illness go, so they can be amongst their peers and never be isolated, ever.
Let's go forward to October 1965. So you make this big decision, and this is on the eve of it being clear that you made the right decision. We've talked about this, the kind of rebellion that started in '63. Can you just tell us a little bit about, I know you've told this story a lot before, but that day in IBC studios recording My Generation, and in particular that lyric?
Well, the song was first presented to us, and from what I remember, it was a bit like the Magic Bus rhythm. It was a bit like that. But that's a kind of Bo Diddley thing from the 60s that we used to do. And I distinctly remember it was Moon that gave it its drive. He just put everything on the one. And it just... something happened immediately with that song. And it came from Keith. And I do stutter. I have to fight my stutter all the time. That's why reading the book is not an easy thing for me to do, and it wasn't easy to do the audio book. So the stutter at the beginning was done unintentionally at first, and then Kit Lambert went, "Wow, keep it in," and then of course it became part of the song, and it's legendary now. But what it did is that it sums up the insecurity, but the passion of youth. It's all in that record. The anger, the hope, the arrogance. But equally, there's even more than that going on it, I think. And the stutter makes it work because it makes it human.
A final question from me. How long are you and Pete and the band going to be carrying on? Indefinitely. into your 90s?
No, I mean, I think Pete feels the same way. I'd like to do it because I think we play his music better than anyone. And all the time, yeah. And all the time we can do that well and not cheat it. If I ever think, I did have a few years there where my voice, I had a precancerous condition on my throat, where my voice wasn't good, and I thought I was going to have to stop. But since then, I've kind of cured the problem, and I take care of it now. And I'm going to go on doing it as long as I can still do it and not cheat it. If I ever come off and think, you can't do this anymore, Rog, if I ever get that thought go through my head, that will be it. I'll walk away from it because I don't want to cheat you.
I'm going to ask, I've got one question that was sent in, and this is what unfortunately we're going to have to finish with. Deb Trombley, if you're in the audience, sing your favourite Who lyric out loud. You're not in the audience, big surprise.
No.
Did you ever...
That's bogus then, isn't it?
Did you ever hit anyone or yourself with the flying microphone?
I hit myself all the time with it. And I only ever hit one person with it, and that was deliberately. And that was a teddy boy who was down the front at the Albert Hall in 1969 when we were playing opposite the Stones in the park. They were in the park. We were in the Albert Hall, and we were playing with Chuck Berry. And Chuck's audience was very different from the kind of the soon-to-be hippies of the Who audience. They were teddy boys. Because one of them was probably about 5 or 6 rows back. I just saw him do that, and he just saw his hand do that. That's about as far as you can see when you're on stage. And didn't know what had happened, and I was singing away. We thought we'd do Summertime Blues to try and, make peace with them. And all of a sudden, I felt this warm feeling down my face, and I put my hand up, and my hand's covered in blood. And somehow or the other, I'd been cut in my eyebrow. And I looked down on the stage, and there was on the stage was an old-fashioned penny, which was about that big, copper, and they clipped the sides of it so that the sides were sharp. And that's what he'd thrown at me. But I saw him. And he was stuck in the middle of this 100 Teds all shouting and screaming. And so I've gone. And the look on his face when he suddenly realised that he had nowhere to go. And it was half a good shot.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we just finish it there. Please put your hands together for the one and only Roger Daltrey.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good luck.